look at this week, today, what I wanted to look at is as we go into further into vaetchanan. So we spoke about Moshe Rabbeinu's plea to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the way he describes it. And then he says, well, obviously Hashem didn't hear me. Hashem didn't hear me. And what he told me is to give Yoshua all the instructions and to give him strengthen him, because he's going to take Bnei Israel forward. And then he says, at the end of Perek Gimel, it says, Vaneshev Bagai Mul Beit Peor. We stayed in the valley by Beit Peor. And Rashi says, Vaneshev Bagai V'nitzamtem L'Avodah Zarah. It says, you guys got involved in Avodah Zarah. And nonetheless, the next pasuk is going to continue, and that's what we're really going to focus on. It says, that even though they stayed in Baal Peor, and in Baal Peor they were involved in Avodah Zarah, nonetheless, Kadosh Baruch Hu said to them, okay, you've got to listen to the Torah, you've got to listen to what's being said. And as Rashi explains, everything was forgiven to you. No matter, even though you're involved in Avodah Zarah, remember, Avodah Zarah is the most extreme expression of a disconnect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe says, you, Am Yisrael, you got Hashem to forgive you, but I, Moshe Rabbeinu, I never did any of that stuff. But I never got the schus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgiving me. And if that's the case, V'atah Yisrael, now, we're beginning of Perek Daled, V'atah Yisrael, now that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has said, I'm forgiving you. So what do you need to do? It means you're going into the land of Israel. You're going into this place that you've been promised for generation after generation, that you'll come out of Mitzrayim. You're going to go into there. It's now 40 years later after coming out of Mitzrayim. That those people that were promised there just left you with the knowledge that you would go into this land of Israel. And now, Israel, listen to the chukim. The chukim are we translate them as laws that we are that we don't know the reasons for. That's how we're going to change that a little bit, possibly. And to the laws which are socially instructive. The ones that I command you to, and those are the laws that Hashem says you've got to keep. Why? In order that you'll live. And then you'll come and you'll inherit the land, which Hashem, the God of your fathers, has given you. And I want to focus specifically on this pasuk because there's a lot in it, and you'll see. So the Ibn Ezra is a Spanish from the amazing Rishon. We don't often quote him, but he says, what does this mean? Which I am instructing you, which I'm teaching you to do. He says, ikir halimud la'asot hamitzvah. I'm teaching you to do, because the ikir, the essence of the learning of Torah is what? Is not to just have some nice ideas, but rather is to la'asot hamitzvot, is to do the mitzvot. And why is that? Why? What does it mean? In order that you'll live. Because those who bow down to idols get destroyed. And I'm telling you, if you keep the Torah, you'll live. Virashtim. What does virashtim mean? Virashtim means that you will inherit. Says because you rested, and because now there is no longer the space of Avodah Zarah, so you'll get this reward of going into Eretz Yisrael. The Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, Eric asked me about him the other day. So just to remind you who he is, he was the last Rosh Hashiva of Volozhin, a very powerful person. Is the reason why I quote him so much. It just resonates with me, and so hopefully it'll resonate with you as well. So he says, what's going on? He says that it's for him. What is Shema Yisrael al Chukim ve'al Mishpatim? What are the Chukim and what are the Mishpatim? He says we understand that when we speak about a chok, he says that the way the Torah presents it, sometimes it means a specific din. So, for example, Zot Chukat HaTorah, and it speaks about the Para Aduma. So chok could be a specific din, But when it speaks about chukim as a general term, it's not talking about dinim. It's not talking about laws. It's talking about what he says, Elu hamidrashot yud gimel midot she'atorah nidreshet b'hem v'nechkeket b'chol teva v'ot. When it speaks about the chukim, he says it's not talking about the laws. It's talking about the way in which we are able to take every single letter and every single word of the Torah and learn the lessons from that. And mishpatim, and what are the mishpatim? Elu hadinim shenechkar al yedei zeh. The dinim, the mishpatim are the laws that come out of our investigation into each little turn of phrase and every letter and every way the Torah is written. In order for us to find halachot charashot, and all of a sudden the Netziv is telling us something very special to understand. That Bnei Israel are about to go into Eretz Yisrael. They're about to no longer have the man. They no longer have anything that they would have had before. They also no longer have Moshe Rabbeinu. And if they no longer have Moshe Rabbeinu, who is going to teach them the laws, what they have to do? So we're going to say Yehoshua, but Yehoshua is not Moshe Rabbeinu. Yehoshua doesn't hear from the mouth of Hashem. Yehoshua heard from the mouth of Moshe. So what Moshe is saying to Bnei Israel, don't worry. I've taught you the way in which to learn Torah. The way in which you learn is the Yud Gimel Midot, She'atorah Nidreshet B'hem, the 13 principles through which the Torah is learned, and that we say every single day as part of the davening every morning. And those 13 principles will give us the ability to learn out halacha, umotzi'am halachot chadashot, and bring out new halachot, v'koach hatalmud shebachol dor, and that is the strength of the learning in every generation. Why is it that we are able to take the laws of Shabbat that were given in the Torah that have no relationship whatsoever, let's say, to a motor car, because we are able to understand through the Yud Gimel Midot, through these 13 principles of learning, how Torah needs to be extrapolated from one generation to the next, from the fundamental principles of Torah. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu says to Bnei Israel. Don't think that Torah is static. Torah is a constantly moving thing, and since it's a constantly moving thing, with it, Lama'an tichyu, there you will live. So the Netziv asked of his question, what does it mean, Lama'an tichyu? If you don't keep Torah, you're not going to live. It doesn't seem to be that Torah is like a panacea for life. It may give us meaning, but where is it life? He says, because we have to understand that it's not, when the Torah speaks about the word tichyu, life, it's not talking about physical aliveness only. I don't know if that's the right word, aliveness. But the kavanah is simply what he says, alizat hanefesh v'oneg shmeisig b'higiu l'tachlit shleimuto. That the whole thing is the enjoyment of being able to, sorry, one second, just got to open the gate. Sorry about that. The enjoyment of life, of being able to enjoy that which life has to offer. Because when a person has a positive spiritual and emotional experience, that gives us life. It gives us the ability to move forward, to push forward, to find optimism, to go positive, and to do all those things which we need to do. And so therefore, comes the Netziv and explains that when Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Bnei Israel this, he's saying to them, look into the Torah, learn how to find positive spiritual life and enjoyment, because then when you come into Eretz Yisrael, which is the home of our spirituality, then it'll be different. And he says, and that's va'aklal, he says, because a person, because if a person thinks that his whole life has got to be focused on his physical life, and a behemoth doesn't get oneg, doesn't get enjoyment. Just the only way it gets it is just by eating and drinking. If a person destroys their ability to feel the spiritual connection, and all he does is he looks into the physicality of the world, and that's all that person is trying to focus on, Such a person is considered like an animal. And is not considered to be an Adam Chai, an alive person. Because he destroys that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives him the ability to live B'tov. And what the Netziv is saying is so important. It's interesting because he's talking at the time that there's the change of the of the world from a much more open world for the Jewish people in Eastern Europe. And all of a sudden they're engaging no longer in Torah and mitzvot and living in that sheltered world that they were living, but in a much more open world where a lot of people threw away the Torah. And what the Netziv is saying is he's speaking, yes, he's speaking to us because we also have to learn that, but he's also speaking to them. And he's saying to them, please don't just give up all of this ruchni feel, the spiritual feel, because in giving that up, then all you're left with is the physical shell, and the physical shell is not something that will give us sustenance when things are when we need that and when things are difficult. So to a person who serves Hashem with emunah, mit'aneg umarbish chiyut. Such a person who serves Hashem with emunah is mit'aneg, gets enjoyment. Umarbish chiyut, he feels like this life force. Mizeha avoda. And therefore, a person who destroys that part through the ability to connect on the spirituality of the Torah is considered to be what we call a mate. Because he destroys the potential life force that he has within him. And really that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying to Bnei Israel. Don't focus on the physical. Yes, you're going into this land where you're going to have to start working hard. You've never done this before. For 40 years, they haven't worked a day in their lives. Right? It's unbelievable that go into the land of Israel but understand that you've got to work, and it's physical and it's demanding and it requires so much focus outside of the spiritual pursuit of learning Torah, which you've been doing for the last 40 years. But still understand that even in that environment, you've got a place on which to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the best way. And that's really what the whole the halachas of Choshen Mishpat are, that they give us a certain level of attachment whilst we are even in our business environment, to be able to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to feel the spirituality even in a difficult time. And why is it so important for them to have that when they're going into the land of Israel? Because as the Netziv explains, that the land Hamakom because the land of Israel is the place which is most connected to that type of life. Because, and this is a lesson for all of us, in Chutz La'aretz you can't live like that. You can't completely this physical and the spiritual together. Mishum, why? Because there's a lack of the connection and the experience of being close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And even though we can do the best that we can, we have to try the best that we can, even though we're in Chutz La'aretz. Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, the 2.5 tribes are staying on that side of the Jordan. You're going into this land where you can connect even through the most physical thing, if your focus is on a spiritual reality. That's Eretz Yisrael, and please God, we should all be